Thank you very much for that kind welcome, and I feel like I'm in the middle of an international film festival with two actresses that are moderating all day today. And of course, some of the audience look like some of the movie stars too, so maybe I am in the right place. It's indeed is a pleasure for me to be back in India. It's been too many months since I've been here, and it's particularly rewarding to be part of a leadership summit. And my comments, I think, will add on to the comments which was made a few moments ago about talking about what's missing. And I think when we look at the evolution of information security and where we are, think about where we started at. The early days of security as it related to ICT systems was about the technology. Some of the earlier things were about antivirus and firewalls and intrusion detection systems, and that seemed to be sufficient at the time. And it did slow things down. Early days of web defacements, which was sort of the most annoying thing in the world, but it really wasn't that detrimental. In the early days, we saw some attacks on defense systems. At least in my country, we started seeing attacks as early as the early 1990s as we moved from a closed network environment to more open commercial off-the-shelf environment. So the bad guys said, well, wait a minute, they looked for every advantage they could be. As we developed better technology, they developed technology to counter that. We rolled out new products, they developed new ways to do things. As we did a better job in securing the networks from a technology perspective, they started attacking the applications. And of course, think where we will be next when we start looking at where the next generation of applications at on our mobile devices. Online banking, booking airlines, hotels, anything we need to do now, we can generally find an application somewhere on a mobile device. But with all that technology and with all the cat and mouse game of the criminals and the good guys, and not even sure in many cases who's the good guys or who's the bad guys, there's one thing that sort of rings forth where we need to be today, and that's leadership and information security. Now, does that mean as an information security professional, I now have to become a business person? That's true. That train left the station a good 5 years ago when we had to stop thinking about technology and start thinking about business. But that's for those of us that were in the security business. As we had to evolve and learn and grow, we no longer can start talking about all the technology components, but what are the things that enable businesses? But then we also discovered something else. We became, for a long while, even as we moved from the technology ranks to the senior managers to that sort of progression we've had into the executive ranks of leadership in technology, we still, in many cases, when it came to security, was the lone voice out in the middle of the wilderness. Until recently. Because there was a recognition that under GRC, governance, risk, and compliance, that our voices were not the only voices that were necessary. When you looked in some cases from a government regulatory perspective that said, okay, if you're going to run a business and the business is going to store personally identifiable information, you're going to have customer data, you're going to have all these things that are necessary to make a business successful, it also becomes the responsibility of the leadership to protect it. It's no longer blame it on the CIO or say it's a security problem. It now becomes a government issue, a governance issue from the top ranks of the leadership. From the chief executive to the board of directors to the senior executives, leadership is now part of governance. But it didn't stop there. There's that risk component, because with the governance responsibility you also have a fiscal responsibility, particularly for publicly traded companies or companies that have investors. It's up to the leadership to make sure that they're getting their money's worth out of the organization. I work for a part-time basis for two of the major venture capitalist firms in the United States. And so when they know they're going to invest $20 million into a startup and trust someone to run that, they not only have to make sure that they protect the data, but they spend the money wisely. So part of the leadership in security is to making sure that you're spending the right amount and doing the right risk management to identify what it is you need to spend, but not too much. That's not an easy dance to dance, ladies and gentlemen. It's very difficult. And it becomes more complicated by the economic environment we live in today. All indications we're back on the rise from that. But the situation is that doesn't mean we can absolve ourselves of the responsibilities of being fiscally sound in implementing security. And the last part of that is the compliance component. And when we start looking at regulations and things that are taking place in the European Union, in the United States, even here in India. I was in Malaysia last week looking at some of the laws that are being proposed, not just about cybercrime, but about private and protection of data, about data breach notification, which of course in the United States is a tremendous, tremendous debate right now. One of the problems we have with 50 states and the territories, everyone has a different interpretation. Encryption, no encryption, possibility of, or for sure that it was accessed. Who do you notify? If someone lives in one state and their data is from somewhere else, do you have to... All these legal issues that we're dealing with all boil down to compliance. But compliance almost is the byproduct of governance and risk. Because I truly believe if you have good governance, if part of your governance structure is not just the strong financial viability of the company, providing the best products to your customers, whether it be the government providing services to the citizens, or private industry providing power and trash pickup and the things that we talked about a few moments ago. If you're doing those things right, and you're managing the risk right, the compliance comes along with that. Because you can comply automatically almost in doing the right thing. But doing the right thing requires leadership. And leadership in the information security field needs to move beyond the technology. You have the three components of it. You have the people, the processes, and the technology. And leadership, and with continuing growing of leadership in the business perspective for security is where our next generation needs to go. And that's why I'm very, very pleased that OWASP and Securitybytes have gathered all of you here tonight to take the leadership skills that you've put together in your businesses and put that other layer on top of it with the information security component as well. So with that, thank you ever so much for the opportunity to make some comments, and I look forward to engaging with you later on this evening. Thank you.
And it's really nice to be here. So I appreciate the opportunity from OWASP and Securitybyte that invited me to come and speak. Now, I'm not a big Bollywood fan, so I don't know what Indian movies look like, but I'll take Howard's word for it that these are the movie actors, and I mean, I can believe that, but if you think these are the actors, then I'll just take your word for it. So we'll hear some discussion about security concerns when outsourcing. When it's outsourcing, I think there's a lot of them, and I think they'll be bringing them up shortly. As you may know, there's a couple of economists that received Nobel Prizes lately, and they've been doing studies that kind of border between economics and psychology. And one of those studies is incentives and how people react to incentives, both personally and an economic level and a personal level. One of the problems with one of the main concerns when it comes to security and outsourcing is that incentive. Security tends to break down in an unknown time after the product is finished. So if you're outsourcing your product to somebody, they'll finish the product and they won't be there when security breaks down. So there was a really interesting talk this morning from the Microsoft Security Response Center. Now these guys get the phone calls, or these guys get information about security holes. So they're right there when it breaks, and they make sure that the products are secure because they know if it's not secure, they'll get the phone call. Outsourcing companies don't have that incentive. So theoretically, why should they really worry about security? From the customer's point of view, that's a big problem because, again, they're not going to be there when the product breaks. They've got no real incentive to make sure it's secure. There's issues in checking that the product is secure before the product is done and it's finished. So there's a problem there. There's a very basic, I don't need to, I don't expect to win a Nobel Prize for saying this, but there's an obvious